Chairman, House Committee on Budget and National Planning, Executive Committee Member, Director. My name is Elishola Olanikalito, the permanent.
My name is Ilan Director Admin,
My name is Victoria.
And directors. My names are Prince Clem Agba, members of the committee from the House of Reps, permanent secretary, directors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First, let me welcome you to the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the Budget and National Planning arm of the ministry. The ministry itself is made up of the main ministry and 4 parastatals. These are the National Bureau of Statistics, the Center for Management Development, the Budget Office of the Federation, and then NISA, which is in Ibadan. Our primary responsibilities are to come up with strategies to develop a national development plan for our country, and then flowing from the priorities in the national development plan, we make the budget proposals, which is eventually forwarded to the National Assembly for review. And then eventually, like you know, it comes back to Mr. President for assent and becomes law. In your letter to us, you have requested to be made aware of the capital releases for the ministry from January 2018 till March 2020. You've also requested to be informed of the funding received from our development partners. And thirdly, you want details of trainings as capacity development, which development partners provide to the MDAs. We have put all of this together in a booklet, and I'm sure that it's been circulated. But as you look through them, or if you want more details, I would allow the technical people, the technocrats, to speak through them. However, let me also use this opportunity to inform you, although we had written to you before, that the process of the successor plan to the ERGP, which is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, the medium-term plan that we have that will expire December 31st this year, and the Nigerian Vision 2020 has commenced. Mr. President had since approved the institutional arrangement for this, which has 3 different levels: a steering committee, central working group, and the technical working group. Like you know, Mr. Chairman, from the letter we had written to you, Mr. President had approved that your humble self and the distinguished senator chair of the planning committee are members of the steering committee. We are waiting, Mr. President, to give us a date and timing for the inauguration of that steering committee. However, because the budgets normally flow from the plan, about 2 months ago, or rather in May, we had inaugurated the macroeconomic and growth diagnostic technical working group to begin work so that the framework for the plan itself can be ready. And like you know, it is from that framework that the budget itself flows. So the MTEF that we, for 2021 to 2023, that we recently discussed with your leadership last week, is based on that framework. Nothing is cast in stone yet because we do not know what the recommendations will be for the plan, as the 26 technical working groups have gradually started meeting. They were inaugurated about 4 weeks ago, and the Central Working Group was inaugurated July 7th this month. Mr. President is committed to having a true national development plan. So he has approved that the plan development will be led by the organized private sector, and that government will only be an enabler. To this end, he approved that Mr. Atedo Peterside will be the chairman of the steering committee to lead the plan. And the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Shamsuddin Ahmed, will be a co-chair from the government side, so that the logistics and the requirements to enable the plan, she will be the link between the steering committee and the government. Because of the various diversities that we have in the country, Mr. President has also ensured that membership of that steering committee reflects those diversities. First, we have different political parties. And what has been done is that the three main political parties, especially at the Senate, those that are represented at the Senate, would have representatives in that steering committee. And we have since written to the leadership of those parties to nominate their representatives as approved by Mr. President. One other diversity we have in this country is that we are made up of men and women. So the leadership of the Prominent Women Association is also a member of the steering committee. A prominent youth organization is also leading. The physically challenged are also represented in the steering committee. We have since written to the Nigerian Governors Forum, and they have submitted their nominees. We also made a request that each state should send 2 representatives. The reason is we want the state's involvement and acceptability. The local government, which is the third tier of the government, is also represented at the Algon leadership level. So these are the arrangements that have been put in place. The plan is not a party plan, but that the plan is a true national development plan. We are also working simultaneously on the perspective plan for the nation. Not only the replacement or successor plan to the RGP, which is the medium-term plan from 2021 to 2025. We are working on 2 medium-term plans, another one from 2026 to 2030. Then a perspective plan, which is a very long-term plan with a 30 years horizon, which we call the Nigeria Agenda 2050. In coming up with the various technical working groups, we have taken a closer look at the various agendas that Nigeria has subscribed to, like the AU Agenda 2030, and also the Sustainable Development Goals. Like you know, there are 17 SDG goals, so we have mapped them to the 26 technical working groups. We have also looked through the AU Agenda 2030 and ensured that they are effectively also mapped to these technical working groups that we've put in place. The framework for the plan is also to ensure that programs, projects are also costed, and to put a very sustainable monitoring and evaluation for implementation in place. Because like it's been said in the past, we've had plans, but the issue of our plans has been that of implementation. And one of the issues that we've had with the implementation is that those plans had not carried along these various diversities that I've talked about and gotten their inputs. And so if their inputs are not there, it means that there is an issue with acceptability and that of implementation. It is our hope that by the time these plans are completed next year, first the 2021 to 2026 first medium-term plan will be completed this year. Then the second medium-term and the perspective plan we expect to be completed next year. One major thing we are looking at in developing the first medium-term plan is Mr. President's promise to Nigerians to take away 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. So it forms a major theme that those developing the plan would work on. But for the very long-term plan, that's the perspective plan, we're leaving it to those developing the plan from the steering committee level to come up with a vision for Nigeria. What do we want to see with Nigeria in the next 30 years? And that, based on that, begin to develop the plan. Some countries, you know, the way they do it, they say we want to be the industrial hub of the continent. Some might say we want to be the transportation hub of the continent. Some people may choose tourism. But we are not telling the committees this is what it must be. That's why these professionals have been brought together. Most of them are from the academics, the Nigerian Economic Society, NES, also NESG, NASIMA, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, SMIDAN. They are all part of this team because, like I said, we don't want the development to come from government. Government will enable, but the organized private sector would drive it. That, in a nutshell, are my remarks. Depending on your questions or how you want us to go through this, the the technocrats would speak through it. Once more, you are welcome. Thank you and God bless.
How we can collaborate as a committee and as a ministry to see how the planning for this country has been favorably implemented and how it's having effect on the generality of Nigeria. That's the main purpose of this article. Based on your presentation, we have been planning years to number, but we don't see the effect on the Nigerian population. Those are the key areas we want us to address. Because every people, gathering people, every administration come out with different plans, Vision 1010, Vision 2020, Vision 3030. Those have effect to our public, to our Nigerians. So these are the areas we want us to iron out. And that's why I said there's need for us to have a sort of working relationship. You said you wrote a letter to me. I've not received any letter. I'm saying it categorically, but I've not received any letter as far as the other standing committee or any committee is concerned, as far as I'm concerned, general as committee.
Let the registry to check.
For the past how many years we have been hearing the issue of moving people out of the job, creating job opportunity. But how does it grow? How is the plan? The implementation is key. You can have fantastic or robust planning. It's not well articulated and implemented. It's not the amount of nothing. And these are the kind of things we are going through in this country. I think this item, this is just an oversight. Whatever we observe, do this our oversight. We come up with our own recommendation and observation. But at this moment, I want to give room to my members to, if anyone of them have questions based on your presentation and your opening remark. So the floor is open.
So I want to know is it that the staff, you don't have competent hands in the ministry to do these things? Because going through the pages, most of the jobs were done by consultants. In a ministry where I know that we have some of the most competent and qualified Nigerians. So why is this practice?
Is this under the
No, the one you gave us on capital project executed from January 2018 to March 2020. If you go in to the breakdown, you see the Ministerial Tenders Board projects awarded between 2018 to 2019. If you break down, you see consultants. The capital projects executed from January 2018 to March 2020. The number one is numbered 1, 2, 3 to number, I can see 36 here, 51. Just to open the document given to us by the minister. This is it. Capital releases, yes. Capital projects executed from January 2018 to March 2020. Yes, if you go down, it's broken down from 1 to about 36 numbers. So in going through it, you see most of the jobs were done by consultants and money paid and completed. Then you look at the issue of stationaries, computers, repetitions. When you come to number 9, you will see the award of contracts for the supply of office accessories and stationery items. Then going down again, you get another breakdown of the same number 8, award of contracts for supply accessories and consumables. This is just semantics. What the consumables are, they not part of the disposable accessories. So that is, I think my main concern is on the use of consultants in a ministry that is well equipped with people who are sound. Because I'm opportune to know the people, some of the people working in the ministry, and I know that they are competent to do these jobs. So just as an explanation on why it is the practice.
Your explanation concerning the structure and composition of the steering committee and the processes for establishing or building of the plan. I just want to know if there is any synergy between the National Planning Office and the respective state offices in the process of developing this plan. As you made mention of taking over 100 Nigerians out of poverty, I'd like to know if it has a grassroots contribution towards that. A lot of times we have national programs and national plans, and it is not scaled down to the grassroots from the time of planning. And it makes it very difficult during implementation, and even in terms of ownership by the people at the grassroots.
Because in our attempts to make it all inclusive, it appears to me to be so unwieldy as to be capable of defeating the very purpose of a truly cohesive planning committee, steering committee, that's desirous of really achieving results. You cannot cater to, in an attempt to cater to the interests of all sectors, make the composition so expansive as to be basically, capable of deviating from the focus that you ought to have to achieve its objective. That's one. And then the thing you talked about, sometimes when we come to places like this, it's very important not to, indulge in hyperbole. We should limit ourselves to, the core substance. We've had this thing about taking 100 million Nigerians out of poverty over the years. It's 5 years now down the line, 3 years to go. And this ministry is pivotal to this government achieving its in this regard. We all know now that that objective, apart from being incapable of being achieved, exists only in the Netherlands. So I don't think it's even one part of your comments here to tell us that the government plans to take out 100 million people out of poverty, as part of your plan in this ministry. That's not going to work. So you can just limit yourself to the things that are actually substantive, verifiable, and achievable. Okay, that's just an aside.
The 2020 budget suffered a lot of setbacks as a result of the coronavirus. Ordinarily, if we have very good substantial plans on ground, perhaps we would have been able to take care substantially of the shocks that are associated with it. Going forward, what is the ministry doing to further strengthen this and to avoid a repeat of the experience we have had? That's one. Number two, the National Planning Ministry has been responsible for the budgets that we've been having substantially over the years. And the history has remained that we have this vision, that vision, as government comes and goes. What is the ministry doing to have a holistic plan for the Nigerian people, to the extent that if there are changes in government, we will be able to live by those plans and forge ahead? Thirdly, as the Honorable Minister, we would want to see between 2019 and 2020, what are the performance indicators that we can visibly see that national planning has been able to put in place and that we're making the desired progress?
I want to know whether is this ministry or the executive ministry with the mandate that you are tracking the performance or feedback of what has been spent on what I've seen in some items. Like if you take the first page, you say agricultural development. That is about $17,000. Then you take food crop production. Food crop production. I want you to explain. I really don't understand how you can be able to have a feedback in terms of this money is assigned to this sector, food crop production. Is it the Ministry of Agri that will have the money and execute it, or any of its agencies? Or when you want to know the feedback, are they the one to give you, or you go and look at what they do, or from the National Bureau of Statistics that will be able to get this? And then all this intervention, in terms of the policy, I have been in the Committee of Agri in the last 12 years. I am not aware in any way that the committee, both the Senate and the reps, have been invited to give an input to whatever policy deliberations you want to come up as regards production in the agricultural sector. I'm saying so because if you take what is happening now, you take two crops, rice and maize. As I am talking to you, we sell a paddy rice of 75 kg is sold at 15,000 naira. As against in the last 4 or 5 years, around 5,000, 6,000. And now we say we are coming up with rice mills across the country. So there is too much pressure as to the production aspect. And I have not seen from the budget of Agri Ministry 2018-2019 anything the ministry has added to the value of production in the country. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this committee should track, find out what are these monies used for and how we can be able to get a feedback as to the value for money. I think this is very important to us because a lot of monies, apart from the budget, then this that are coming from development partners, we don't know whether the value we are supposed to have for the money, whether it's really in the interest of Nigerians. So it is important. I am a farmer. I'm telling you what is happening. I'm telling you, if you have a rice mill today, one of my friends has sold his production in the next 2 years. He's not taking money from anybody. It means you don't even have to market. So there is demand, there is pressure. But we say we want to be self-sufficient in rice production. But nothing has been, from the ministry aspect, nothing has been done with the continuity from what I have known in the ATA, agricultural transformation agenda, from the seed system to the production aspect. It has been stagnated. Nothing is going on from the ministry. Only the Anko Barua is the one that is helping the system for now. But if we want to continue so that we can have a sustainable productivity in the sector, then national planning must make sure that you bring the relevant stakeholders so that we will have a plan for the next 5-10 years to sustain the productivity. But I'm telling you, people are encouraged to put rice mills, but they don't have the paddy to process. So that is the pressure now on this sector. The same with the maize, the same with soybeans. Maize is selling at 17,000 naira per bag as against 4,000, 5,000, 5 years, 2 years, 3 years ago. So these are some of the things I think we are missing the issue somewhere. So we need, because food security is the most important aspect that we should make sure these monies are making us to be sustainable in terms of our population and the West African sub-regions that depend on us to produce for them.
Considering your mandate and the strategic plans to implement the set goals, how far have you been able to achieve them? Thank you.
That have been asked. First, you talked about the fact that you've not received your letter of appointment to the steering committee. I found that very, very strange because I signed the letter. So I've asked the PS to check with the registry so that we would know where that letter has gone, whether it was dispatched, when it was dispatched, and who has received the letter. So we'll get back to you on that. Chair, you also spoke about implementation failure. You know, when we talk about government is not just the executive. You know, government is executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And in the budget process and in running of the budget itself, it actually involves two major arms in what is implemented. That is the executive and indeed the legislature. There are a lot of factors that affect budget implementation. I have become a minister now for close to a year in this ministry. And one of the things I see is that we are spreading ourselves too thin, that even the budget that we make itself is set up for failure ab initio. What do I mean by this? You have the Abuja, Lokoja, Benin road that has been on for over 13 years now. We know clearly what is required because contracts have been put in place. If I were to send an appropriation proposal and I say section A, 8 billion, section B, 12, because I know the contract that has been put in place, and the budget that I get back is 400 million for section A, and then 200 million for section B. It means that that road will not get finished. The completion period will keep pushing further. We cannot say that's a problem of the executive. You know, so there's the need to have this understanding amongst ourselves and to prioritize, to say what is important that we need to finish. Because as government change, you find that new people come in, either from the executive or from the legislature, and then we begin to impute new projects into the budget and allocate little amounts across. So it means those projects are not going to be done. So I think that from both sides, we need to sit together to say, what are the major trunk A roads, for instance, in the country that runs across the 6 geopolitical zones. Why don't we focus on those and get them completed? And the reason for this is there is paucity of funds. We don't have enough to put everywhere. I always talk about the example of using a loaf of bread and a little butter. If you have a full loaf of bread and you need to make a sandwich, and the butter that you have is so small, you may decide to take a little part of the bread and use the butter so that you can enjoy your sandwich. But if you spread that little butter that you have in your entire loaf of bread, you are not going to have a sandwich. You will not enjoy it. That's exactly what's been going on. The allocations to especially infrastructure projects, they are too low. And then we get involved in too many, and that's why it's low. So if you are focusing on 1,000 roads and you have only 200 billion available, you begin to put 100 across. But where you decide to choose some priority roads, some people feel that they are left out and say, no, my road must be there, it must have an appropriation. That, for me, is a major problem area. We had a retreat in Lagos in late February to early March, which involved membership from both the Senate and the House of Reps, from both your committees. In the House of Reps, the Appropriation Committee, the Finance Committee, in both houses in the National Assembly. Your colleague from the Senate was present in Lagos, and we discussed these issues, and we resolved on what needs to be done to ensure that implementation will be better. There's the issue about the synergy with states on the plan, and that's one of the things I spoke about. And that's why I talked about diversities. So there seems to be a lot of focus on the federal government of Nigeria. Whatever comes into the Consolidated Revenue Fund is shared amongst the federal government, about 52%, and the rest goes to the subnationals. So you find that in Nigeria today, most Nigerians don't know their local government chairman. And those are the people that are at the grassroots that they really should know and should be responsible. If the roof of a house gets blown off, people say government should come to our aid. What government are they talking about? Federal government. And I think that attitude needs to change. And that's why we are saying the states and the local government need to be part of the plan and participate in the development of the plan. But on a monthly basis, we meet with the 36 states of the Federation. The budget and other economic development, like they call it in some states, some call it planning. With COVID-19, what we've been doing is having virtual meetings. We call it the community of practice, where we discuss about issues, we discuss about programs, and what the government is doing. Honorable member mentioned that the steering committee is too unwieldy, it's too large. What we have done, first and foremost, like I said, is that it's being driven by the private sector. At the steering committee level, that's not where the technical work is done. Much of the work is done at the technical working groups. And there are 7 clusters. In these 7 clusters, we have 26 technical working groups. The coordinators of the various technical working groups become the members of the central working group, where we have Dr. Mrs. Alade, the special advisor to the president on the economy, leading the team. We also have the statistician general, the director general DMO, the director general budget office, and all others helping to coordinate the consolidation of what the various technical groups have done. So at the steering committee level, it's mainly about seeing the final product that has been produced and to deliberate on it to ensure that all sectors are adequately covered. You agree with me that if you put engineers in this room to have a meeting, they will only talk like engineers. They will build a 50-story building on a land that does not belong to them. So, and that's why you need lawyers to be in the room, because as the engineers are only looking at the building, the lawyers will be looking at the title of the land that you want to build. It's always good to have a team, people from different backgrounds, because viewpoints differ. So what you forget, others would bring up. Not all ministers are part of it. Ministers have been selected based on those clusters, because some areas are cross-cutting. And it was with a view to ensuring that it is not that unwieldy that was done. He also mentioned that we keep talking about removing 100 million people out of poverty, and that this promise has been on for 5 years. I don't think that is quite correct. Mr. President made this promise June 12, 2019, as he was starting his second term. That's when he was reading his address that he mentioned it. And I'm an appointee of the president. It is his vision that I would run, not my own vision. And that is why it is paramount that since he has made that promise, it has to be the centerpiece for putting together the medium-term plan. Well, like I said, for the long-term perspective plan, the teams as they meet would come up with what that vision should be. And recall I was making examples of saying maybe our focus may want to be either the transportation hub for the region or even for Africa. It could be the tourist destination or whatever. Different countries choose something long term that they begin to work towards. There was, what are we doing about the fiscal buffers? That we are going through some issues right now. A 2020 budget suffered through the original budget itself, the pandemic, and we didn't have enough fiscal buffers. This ministry is a coordinating ministry. The finance arm has put the SRG in place on how to try and improve on income generation. We are looking at using technology to collect taxes, levies, and all of that. This is already going on in the customs side. FIRS is doing the same. So now you can begin to see that the revenues that are coming in are performing better than what it was in the past. And if you look at the budget itself critically, you will see that the non-oil sector is beginning to do a lot much better in the last 4 years than it did in the past. It is because of these measures that have been put in place. The plan being developed will come with clear KPIs as a key performance indicators for monitoring. And I did say in my opening remarks that in the past we've had plans and that we've said there have been issues around implementation. And with this current plan that we're putting in place, it is a central part of what the plan developers will also come up with. How do we strengthen the national M&E to ensure proper implementation? And that is why we're also having the involvement of the National Assembly, because we have to co-create, we have to co-deliver. It's one government. You wouldn't say it's legislative government and executive government, it's one government, irrespective of party affiliations. After the elections, a government is formed. So how do we work together to ensure better implementation? A rep talked about agric and sectorial intervention, and you want to know the role that this ministry plays. Again, like I said, we are just a coordinating ministry. No monies come to us. The monies go to the various MDAs. And the aspect that you read, if you clearly look at the top, it says disbursement to sectors supported by donors. The disbursement is to the sectors. The disbursement is not to this ministry. But because we hold the ODA, we are able to see. And so we can run reports and see what is going on. In fact, in the last couple of months, we've been holding meetings with some of these donors to say, in some areas, they are not imputing what they are doing. Sometimes they go direct to states, sometimes they go direct to local governments, and we don't have a view of what they are doing. We are working on reversing on improving the DAD, which is the system that is put in place. It's an online system where they put up all of those information.
So you are just a conduit?
We are not a conduit. Nothing comes to us. We only... No, but it can interject. I don't mind. We are not a conduit. When you say conduit, it means it passes through. It does not pass through. You understand? In the NCDC, as the National Center for Disease Control. And they promised $18.2 million. It is now for this ministry to follow up with the relevant authorities in the Japanese side and put the agreements in place. Also working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We signed those documentation, those agreements. But the support, for instance, which the Japanese have approved of that 18.2 million, is to improve our 7 centers across the country. Money will not come to us. They will just go and do those development. They bring in the equipment, set up the centers, do the capacity development. Ours is to keep the records. The REDICI program, which is partly loan and some of it is grants, that's why when it's loan, it involves the finance side for monitoring. But if it is grant, it involves this other arm, that's the budget and national planning arm for monitoring. But no money comes to us. So we are not awarding any contract. We are not even supervising any contract. It is the sector, the MDA. If it's agric, it's for agric to monitor. If it's health, it's for health to monitor. Ours is just to get the statistics and put it together. So I hope maybe that clarifies that angle. Even in terms of trainings that they talk about, the trainings are strictly meant for staff in the various MDAs, depending on the area of intervention. So when we get those requests, we will write to the ministers in those MDAs to nominate the staff that fall under the criteria that have been set out by the donors. So again, like I said, ours is just that of coordination. Honorable, you spoke a lot about agric. You, in fact, used rice, a rice paddy. You talked about the fact that a lot of rice mills have been set up, but there are no paddies to support them. I'm a farmer myself. I also have a rice mill. You know, I've had to depend on the rice that I grow for my meal, but I don't have enough, just like you have said. But you recall that in the past, a lot of rice was produced because this government paid a lot of attention on agric and improved on the sectorial allocation to agric. And that made a lot of people go back to farm, and a lot was produced. But what happened? First, the Nigerian taste. Oh, if it's not imported, it is not good. So we don't want to eat it. A lot was coming in as import through our borders. And apart from this rice coming in as rice, they were also coming in with other items like drugs and arms. And that was one of the major reasons the borders were closed, because our neighbors were not following the protocol. So what that created was a gap. Once the borders were closed, you know, the supply was no longer there. And it made the price to jump, which is temporary. It's like the GSM when it first came. The price was at its rooftop to get a SIM card. But today, the companies beg you to come and take a SIM card. It's for free. So because of that supply gap, a lot of farmers are now going back to the farms knowing that the mills will be there to receive them. But whilst the borders were closed, the mills that were set up were not functioning because, of course, they did not have enough paddy. So it's an issue of time. You cannot automatically jump up because when you plant, it takes some time for it to grow. However, even with the sustainability plan, we are engaging the states to get more land, acreages to improve on production. And we're looking at between 20,000 to 100,000 hectares. But one of the things that we're looking at in terms of the agri, first is to help improve on evacuation of product, because it's a major issue. The farms, most of our farms are in the rural areas, and the rural areas have been neglected for long. And we are saying that we'll put out funds to development of rural roads to help evacuation of products. Two, when those roads are also done, it will help to encourage value-creating value chain industries around those areas to help in not only processing, but also storage. And this is with a view to reducing post-harvest losses. Because statistics have shown that where we produce 10,000 tons, about 6,000 tons goes to waste. It does not get to the market. So that's a low-hanging fruit that needs to be dealt with. Because if you don't deal with it and you continue to expand your acreages, it means that your waste will only grow more. So with this sustainability plan that has been put in place, there is provision to improve on the rural roads around agro corridors with a view to helping to get food out. And also programs that grants facilities through financial institutions at a 5% interest rate with a 1-year moratorium so that investors can get money and set up these value chain industries around the agro corridor. Again, it's not a destination, it's a journey. And the last time we addressed civil society organizations when we spoke through the MTEF, we were also encouraging Nigerians to take advantage of some of these programs that have been put in place. Because what we hear from the financial institutions is that the level of interest is really not high. And we are concerned that if we are not able to create economic activities, we might go into a deep recession. Our GDP for the first quarter is much, much lower than it was in the last quarter of 2019. And from indication from the National Bureau of Statistics, we may likely end the year with a negative 4.41% GDP. And that's why we are doing the stimulus, to ensure that there is economic activity. And we've worked with at the Federal Executive Council, which has agreed that we work with BPP to hasten the procurement process, especially for the remaining part of the year on the revised 2020 budget, with a view to ensuring that there's a lot of activities and that even if we go into a recession, that the recession will not be deep and it will also be short-lived. I think I've basically covered the questions.